Okay, imagine this. You're walking down the street, right? And there's this vendor selling some really beautiful but kind of pricey handcrafted jewelry. Before you even ask how much, you spot a sign. Originally $500. Then the vendor beams and says, but for you, $150. And bam, in that split second, you feel like you've just scored the deal of the century. You're reaching for your wallet. So why? Why do we trust that immediate feeling, that great deal vibe, that fast intuitive judgment, when, let's be honest, that $500 price was probably pulled out of thin air and we wouldn't have paid it anyway? That exact moment where your quick thinking kind of leads you happily down the wrong path. That's really the core of today's extended analysis. We're diving deep into Daniel Kahneman's landmark book, Thinking Fast and Slow. And look, this is more than just a summary, though we have those too. This feature digs into how Kahneman, the Nobel laureate, actually builds his argument, how he creates such incredible influence, and how he earns your trust as a reader. It's about giving you the tools to read with sharper insight, maybe even become a better communicator yourself. But yeah, this is a deep dive for the genuinely curious.
And to help us navigate this analysis, we're actually using some pretty interesting tech ourselves. You're currently listening to a unique two-host AI conversation. It's powered by Google's NotebookLM, which allows us to get a deeper and more dynamic look at the mechanics of this really groundbreaking book.
Yeah, and the central idea, this duality in Kahneman's work, it's just so powerful because it forces you to really look at yourself differently. At its heart, it says human reasoning is kind of run by two main players. There's system one. It's fast, it's automatic, totally intuitive. It's the part of your brain that just knows 2 plus 2 is 4 without thinking. And then you've got system two. That one's slow, needs real effort, it's deliberate. It's the part doing the heavy lifting when you figure out, say, complex mortgage interest. And the book's main mission is basically to challenge that comfy belief we all have that we're inherently rational beings. It does this by showing just how much system one is actually running the show.
Right. And if we start thinking about his authority, his ethos, you realize everything Kahneman says is built on decades of, frankly, exceptional credibility. He isn't just some academic. He's a Nobel Prize winner in economics, even though his background is psychology. That's pretty telling. And crucially, a lot of that authority stems from his long collaboration with Amos Tversky. Together, they basically pioneered the whole field of cognitive biases and how we make decisions. That foundation, that history of discovering these really fundamental glitches in our thinking, it lends enormous weight to every single claim in the book.
That academic weight definitely gets its attention, but I sometimes wonder if focusing so much on the lab work, the studies, makes it feel a bit disconnected from, everyday stuff. I mean, he's talking about huge things, how we handle risk, what we buy, how we deal with people.
That's a fair point, and I think he tackles that potential distance by really setting the context. Remember, the book came out in 2011. That was right when behavioral economics was just exploding into the public consciousness. So the timing, the occasion, it wasn't just about putting out another academic text. It was very much a response to this huge public appetite from business, politics, even just regular life, to figure out why we keep making these predictable thinking errors.
Okay, so the purpose isn't just one thing. He needs to inform us, right? Explain the science behind intuition and logic. But maybe even more importantly, he has to persuade us. Persuade us to actually change how we make decisions day to day.
Precisely. The book explicitly warns us against being overconfident in our own reasoning. It makes you confront the uncomfortable truth that feeling certain often just means system one is feeling overly sure of itself. The real goal is to nudge you towards being more mindful, maybe a bit more skeptical of your own immediate gut reactions.
Okay, let's dig into the logic then, the logos, because that feels like the real engine driving this whole thing. Kahneman isn't just making philosophical points here, he's showing his work. The power of thinking, fast and slow, comes from its heavy reliance on logical structure and, crucially, empirical evidence from decades of psychological experiments.
Yeah.
It's that constant loop, here's the idea, here's the proof, that really wins you over.
And the way it's structured is designed to build that trust piece by piece. He doesn't just throw a list of biases at you. Instead, the examples are laid out very carefully to illustrate the theories behind them. You're shown, through actual evidence, how your mind works, or rather, how it sometimes misfires. That really boosts the logical appeal, I find.
Let's make this concrete for people listening, because these are the concepts everyone talks about after reading the book. We're shown things like anchoring, the framing effect, and that huge one, loss aversion. These are the tools Kahneman gives us to see our own minds more clearly.
Exactly. Take anchoring. You see it literally everywhere, especially in pricing and negotiation. System 2 is supposed to be the rational one, right? But System 1 just grabs the first number it sees. That's the anchor. And then even deliberate System 2 has a really hard time adjusting far enough away from it.
Right. Like that jewelry example we started with. Seeing that $500 original price, even if it's totally meaningless, it anchors your brain high. Suddenly, $150 feels like a bargain, even if the thing's only really worth, say, 50 bucks. Your slow, careful system 2 should dismiss the anchor, but it just struggles to shake off that first impression.
Or think about loss aversion. This might be one of the most powerful ideas from the book. The concept is simple, but its implications are huge. The psychological pain of losing something is roughly twice as strong as the pleasure of gaining the exact same thing. So if you find $100, you're happy. But if you lose $100, that unhappiness is way more intense and sticks around much longer.
In framing, oh man, framing is everywhere. Just changing how you present the same information drastically alters the intuitive reaction. You tell people a medical procedure has a 90% success rate, they feel good, they're likely to go for it. You tell them the exact same procedure has a 10% failure rate. Suddenly, people get nervous and shy away even though the odds are identical. That's pure system 1, reacting to the emotional flavor of the words success versus failure, not the actual numbers.
And that methodical use of evidence anchoring here, framing there, loss aversion woven throughout, it becomes a solid framework for his entire argument.
Now here's something I find really interesting from a persuasion angle, touching on his ethical appeal. Kahneman's credibility gets this massive boost from his transparency. He's not pretending he have all the answers or a perfect, neat theory. He's upfront about the limits of intuition, sure, but he also openly discusses controversies in the field, like admitting that some psychological priming studies haven't held up. He shows you the messy reality of doing science, and ironically, that honesty makes you trust him more.
Yes, that transparency really connects with the structured journey he takes us on. The book follows a very clear path. System 1 and System 2 are introduced right at the beginning, and then he keeps bringing us back to them, using them as anchors as he moves through heuristics, biases, even things like happiness research later on. It's a very deliberate, almost scientific structure itself, which keeps that analytical feel while guiding you through some quite complex ideas without getting you lost.
It's impressive because for a book so grounded in, pretty rigorous, sometimes dispassionate science, it still connects emotionally. While the main vibe is rational, Kahneman definitely uses pathos that appeal to emotion. He does it through personal stories, examples from everyday life that you instantly recognize, and some really vivid metaphors.
Absolutely. And that connects back to his word choices, his diction. He doesn't just talk about abstract mental processes, he brings them to life by describing the systems almost like characters. System 1 is your impulsive, maybe overconfident pal who jumps to conclusions. System 2 is more like the careful, sometimes kind of lazy accountant who has to double check everything.
Yeah. And when you start thinking, okay, System 1 is running the show again, it creates this really personal, almost self-critical connection to the material. You begin to catch yourself in the act thinking, there goes my fast-thinking buddy, trying to hijack things again.
And the rhetorical tools he uses constantly reinforce that self-awareness. Think about how often he repeats the core idea of the two systems. That repetition and parallelism really help it stick. He's always contrasting quick, intuitive judgments with slower, more calculated ones. That contrast really hammers home the risks of relying too much on System 1.
That constant compare and contrast is super effective, isn't it? The juxtaposition of intuition versus deliberation runs through the whole book. It really clarifies the strengths, but also the major weaknesses of both systems in all sorts of situations, from deciding where to invest your money to how juries make decisions.
And he sprinkles in these great rhetorical devices, too. Questions that make you stop and think. Real-world scenarios that feel urgent. That phrase he uses, what you see is all there is. W.Y. Sayati. It's so simple but so profound, it pushes you to challenge your own assumption that you actually have the full picture before making a judgment. Because System 1 is brilliant at creating a coherent story from, well, sometimes very little information, Kahneman forces you to see that blind spot.
Which raises a good question. Are you pausing enough in your own life to let System 2 actually engage? It takes effort. And if you're looking for more ways to really grapple with complex ideas like these, we do have a great resource. Let's pause for mindful moments. That's our YouTube channel, offering AI-powered book analysis, summaries, and critiques. It's perfect for inspiring a bit more reflection and rational thought.
Okay, so moving towards wrapping up the effectiveness of the book, based on this whole rhetorical analysis. The verdict seems pretty clear, doesn't it? Kahneman absolutely succeeds in taking these really complex psychological theories and making them persuasive, understandable for a massive audience. It's that blend of logical rigor, compelling evidence, and that ethical transparency we talked about that gives the book its incredible credibility and lasting impact.
The insight is undeniable, for sure. The book pushes you to cultivate this rational self-awareness while also making you accept that, yeah, unconscious bias is just part of being human. And that leads to the application challenge. We can't just flip a switch and turn off System 1. It's
Yeah.
efficient. It helped us survive for millennia. It's deeply wired in.
Which brings us neatly to what critics often point out as the main limitation, the so-called behavioral gap. Reading the book, you recognize your own cognitive pitfalls. You intellectually understand anchoring or loss aversion, but just knowing about them doesn't automatically change your behavior.
Yeah, that's the tough part, isn't it? Knowing about loss aversion doesn't magically stop it from hurting when you lose that $100. Real behavioral change seems to need more than just awareness. It often demands constant self-monitoring, maybe even setting up external systems or rules to counteract our biases, not just acknowledging they exist. Like maybe setting a rule for yourself, a mandatory 24-hour cooling off period before any big purchase or investment decision.
And maybe that's the ultimate lesson here, not just for readers, but for writers and learners too. Analyzing how this book works. Its incredible effectiveness comes from striking that perfect balance. Deep technical explanation made accessible through relatable analogies, all standing on a foundation of academic rigor and honest transparency. It's that complex recipe that explains why this book resonated so widely. It teaches you not just about your own mind, but about the art of effective ethical persuasion itself.
So wrapping this up, what's the final thought for you to chew on? If just understanding our biases is maybe only half the battle, what systemic changes do we need to make? Not just inside our heads, but maybe in our workplaces, our routines, our environment. How do we design things to help us bypass the easily fooled System 1 and actually demand the slow, hard, but often necessary work of System 2? That feels like the real challenge Kahneman leaves us wrestling with, how to engineer our world and ourselves for better decisions.
For a deeper dive, click the link on screen for the in-depth book summary. And hey, subscribe, share, maybe purchase the book via the link, and above all, try to think rationally.
See the many genre-based book analyses at Mindful Moments. Subscribe and nurture your mind on the go.